thing is an announcement. We are mostly tonight focused on Tracy Mitrano, the next congressperson from New York City. If you are interested in local candidates, which you should be, because local candidates often impact what's going on right around us very immediately. There is another event on Friday night, the 28th, Friday night, at 151 North Main, where the local candidates will be. Keenan Baldridge, who is also here now, and there's literature for him over there, who's running for New York State Senate. Michael Moss, who is running for coroner, and Kevin Henderson, who is running for sheriff. So if you want to know more about those candidates, please go to this event. You can come and ask me if you didn't write down the number. 151 North Main, okay? That will be an occasion when you'll be able to really get to know them. So now I want to introduce Ryan, who will introduce our candidate.
All right, hello. Thank you guys all for being here today. My name is Ryan Quinn. I'm the Deputy Campaign Manager for Tracy Mitrano. So I just wanted to lay out some guidelines for the discussion today. We will be having Tracy speak for about 10-15 minutes about kind of main platform, the main planks of her platform, what she's running on, why she's running for Congress, and then we will be going into the main section, which is going to be questions from all of you. There are some questions over there that people have submitted to ask. We will be coming from those, but we also are going to be handing out a microphone. I will be going up and down the aisle. Just raise your hand. Please don't talk over one another while people are talking to Tracy. We want to make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard. So, without further ado, please welcome Tracy Mitrano.
Well, to see so many people engaged in the electoral process, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is what the United States is all about. This is what I know about the people in our district. I have grown up and lived in the general area of this district my entire life, and I'm so grateful to be part of this process. In fact, I just came from an ESL meeting, English as a Second Language, over in Penn, where we were talking about immigration, and there were people who have just gotten their citizenship, and we were talking about the issues relative to the community and culture, and it just made me really happy to now be engaged in conversations that mean so much to it this time in this country. And I am running to Congress hopefully to set the compass straight once again in the 23rd District. Thank you. Where am I supposed to be? I feel like that would be stand-up comedy. And people in the back, and maybe you can't see me as well, it's okay? Yeah, okay, because I will. Well, let me say a little bit more about who I am, where I come from, what the platform is about, but the most interesting part of our town meetings are always the questions, so I don't want to short time for that. I did grow up in the city of Rochester. By the way, I have cousins who live here. Are the nerd ones here tonight? They've gone to many of my events, but at any rate, I grew up in the city of Rochester. My father owned a small restaurant downtown. He came from a large Italian immigrant family. I'm sure the experience of many people here in Geneva, certainly many people in Rochester and all over the United States. He did not finish high school because 9 children in the family. He needed to leave work in order to help his family of origin, worked on a milk truck, and delivered papers, and did whatever he could, and he brought the money home for his mom to spend for the brothers and sisters. I see people standing up. Would it help if I did this? I will go ahead and do it. Now it's soft shoes. My dad went into the war and served in the Pacific Theater. He served very proudly, earning a Bronze Star, and was in major invasions in Tinian and Saipan and Okinawa. And when he came back, along with his 4 other brothers, they were the Italian version of the Sullivan family. They came back to Rochester and opened the restaurant. My mother, during the war, did finish high school and then began working as a barmaid. Downtown Tavern was across the street from where the restaurant opened up, and that's how my parents met, and the rest of that is history. I worked in my dad's restaurant and worked behind the bar, as a matter of fact, from when I was 13 to 19. I said before, I may as well say again, I don't know where the hell the ABC board was. But it was a great, exciting time. Downtown Rochester was vibrant. The Chase building was going up, which was the Lincoln building at those times. So, you know, in the morning there were people who lived in single occupancy, and during the day it was construction workers and bankers and executives, Kodak and Xerox, lawyers, judges, and so forth. And then middle class people would come and get a bite to eat before they went to shop over at Midtown, Sibley's, McCurdy's, if any of you have any memory of all of that. And I have been very fortunate to have a lot of formal education subsequently, but I want to say that working in my dad's restaurant was probably the best education of my life, and I cherish it when I look back on it. I did go to the University of Rochester, fell in love with the study of history, and then went to Binghamton University where I earned a doctorate. And I began teaching in any number of colleges in this area. I taught at Puka College, at Ithaca College. I was at the University of Buffalo for a couple of years. But by then I met the man who would become my husband, so I returned to Ithaca, where we married and started a family, and went to law school after that. I have two sons. Nico is 26 and Sam is 21. He's working in Boston, the younger one, and I just won this weekend, so I'm still kind of basking in the sun, being able to see my boy and have my boys together again. Nico lives in Ithaca with his fiance. He's a software developer at Cornell. When I finished law school, I began to teach at Cornell University in family and social policy, not knowing, not having any idea that I would ever have the honor of standing before all of you tonight to be talking about the very issues that I used to teach about. And then in 2001, my career took a very interesting turn. There were so many people going into information technology as it was rising in importance throughout the country, and in places like higher education as well as industry. I became the Director of Information Technology Policy, and it was in that space for the past 15 years that I've been working on issues such as net neutrality, balanced intellectual property laws, and cybersecurity. I was at the University of Massachusetts and working as an academic dean of a cybersecurity program that I helped that university create. It was a very interesting project because we could do the same thing here in this district that they sponsored as a public-private partnership with the Mass Mutual Corporation, a non-matriculated program. We had people coming in, some of whom had careers. There was a gentleman who'd been a nurse for 20 years, and he said, my back is killing me, I just want to do something different. And we had some people who were not matriculated into any of the colleges, but came in and did the program, and then is that getting a little loud? And then they were able to graduate and get jobs, $60,000, $70,000 in the Western Massachusetts market, which is very much like our own. It sounds very loud to me. Is it loud to you folks out there? Okay, can you bring it down a little bit, please? Thanks. But given that I have always had citizenship and democracy at the focus of my sites, whether I was teaching American history, whether I was a social policy analyst, whether I was an information technology policy director or an academic dean creating this program I just described, citizenship and democracy have always been at the core of my work. And I have watched the long transition of this country moving in directions that when I was a younger person I did not anticipate. And so subsequent to the election of 2016, which was for me more of a turning point than a light switch, and with emphasis on the issue about Russian interference in the integrity of our elections, I began to wonder how many people in Congress have a specialty in this area to help us understand what we need to do about it. I looked, there was no one. I then thought, gee, maybe I would talk to Mr. Reed about it, and I should mention his people are here filming in the event you want or need to know about it. And I did not feel that Mr. Reed would have been very receptive to anything that I would have to offer on this front. And it was at that point that I began to say, hey, my boys are pledging the nest. I have had a very good life. I am not a super wealthy person by any means, but I have done well. And I could go ahead and leave a job that paid, about as much as Congress. And I've taken 1/5 of my retirement money out because I just hit 59 and a half and was able to do it without a penalty. And that is when I began touring around the district, trying to understand what the issues are, talking with people, and then I entered politics. I'm very grateful to have been the survivor, the person who won the primary. And that is what now allows me to stand before you as the Democratic Working Family and Women's Equality Party candidate for Congress in this November. The main issues that I have come to understand are most important for this district revolve around economic development. But I don't mean economic development in a simple jobs plan or an enterprise zone or some kind of a tax benefit. I mean it comprehensively. And if you are an investor trying to figure out where you're going to put your investment for a 21st century industry, here are the things that you want to think about. You want to be in a place where there are healthy people, educated and trained people, where the infrastructure is functional and up to date. You want to be sure that the development of that area has been consistent with environmental conservation, not despoiled, not treated like a dump. And then you want to be sure that the tax rates are going to work for you in such a way that you don't put in all of this time and money and then have to pay it all back to the government. In all of those areas, the 23rd District has serious challenges. We have not had affordable health care, and we have some of the most unfortunate consequences of that. Children who don't have health care, and I could tell you stories about it that would break your heart. People who have amassed, for no fault of their own, tremendous amounts of medical debt, and we have a congressperson whose family business is in the collections of it. We have people who are addicted on opiates, and while that's a very large issue, going back to how and why we have failed to address illegal drug trade in this country for 50 years. It has been a scourge on the United States. And then we allow pharmaceutical companies to start peddling highly addictive substances to the detriment of 300,000 people in the United States who have died from it, the many who remain addicted, and the failure to have any comprehensive treatment in order to address it. In education, we have a tale of two cities. There are some places, Ithaca, Corning, and parts of Geneva, where the public education is very good, but that is not consistently true throughout this district. And while I fully understand that communities want to have autonomy to a large degree, and how they're educating their children to have public education rely almost solely and singly on local property taxes, is disadvantaging so many students in this district. In the late high school and early college phase of a young person's life, we do not have the kind of curriculum or programs such as the one that I did at the University of Massachusetts to help train people for 21st century jobs, and we need to start doing that. When I talk to executives at Corning Incorporated, they tell me that they have jobs, but they often cannot fill them with local people because those people don't pass drug tests and they don't have the skill set that a 21st century company such as Corning needs and wants. We can do that. We have excellent universities. I'm here in the home of Hobart William Smith. We all know of the other great institutions around this area and district. We just need the ingenuity We need the federal support, along with the state and local, in order to create the kind of programs that are really going to train young people for the jobs of this century and going forward in it. And by the way, not just the young people, but the many people who have displaced by the exit of manufacturing and the transition to a different economy. We are failing to provide what people need in order to be able to retool and get themselves productively back into the marketplace. In the area of infrastructure, I am very close, and so I don't need to tell you about what the extreme weather, oh, I haven't told you, how did I possibly miss my personal #1 issue? How about those interest rates on student debt? Yeah, is that right? 6 to 12% we're imposing on young people? Do you know what is the cause of that? There's a Higher Education Act. It was passed in 1965, and it was designed along with the other Great Society programs of that era to create more opportunity for people to go to college, because education in this country, as a democracy especially, has always been about bettering oneself, being a citizen, experiencing upward mobility. My life story is a cameo of exactly that. But now we have bankers who give big money in their lobbying organizations to congresspeople who stay silent in the reauthorization of these kinds of laws, in this case the Higher Education Act, when those bankers get in there and are assured federally guaranteed loans so long as they get 6 to 12% interest. That's wrong from start to finish. We are pushing down an entire generation that is waiting to start families, unable to get loans in other areas such as a good car so theirs doesn't continue to break down, or put money down for a mortgage. I can't imagine a better way to suppress an entire generation, or to keep people who want to better themselves at any age in their place and not give them an opportunity to advance. So that's a lot of work that we have to do in education, and I bet I am in an audience of people who feel as passionately as I do about it. In the area of infrastructure, I was starting to say, and I see some of my friends here from Seneca County as well as over in Schuyler County, we are experiencing the extreme weather events. We must begin to plan and mitigate against their effects. And that is the most basic of infrastructure. That is the responsibility of government to do it. In this case, we may need an alignment of the federal government with the state and local governments in order to accomplish it to the degree that we need to be sure that every time we have one of these major events, we're not having a whole area or town washed out. It happened a few years ago in Penyan. It happened more recently in Lodi and Sheldrake and Valois. And it's going to happen again, because this is simply the direction of our climate. Building on that, we need attention to the roads, but let me tell you something that is sorely lacking in this district. You may not feel it quite so much in Geneva here, because you've got bus routes to Rochester and New York City and thereabout. Once you get down into the southern tier, there's very little transportation. Not only in your own area to get to a medical appointment or go to a library or get to school, but also for people simply to visit one another. And you can't get a bus that goes from Jamestown to Corning or Elmira like you can if you wanted to get up to Rochester and you jump over to the bus station and grab that. So we need transportation so people can get out and get into the life that they want. And then on top of transportation, let me also share with you that so much of this district lacks the internet, or an internet that is necessary for the needs of their society. Farmers need it, students need it, families need it, schools need it, libraries need it, and it is largely non-existent in most of the southern tier. And let me tell you why that's a real heartbreak, because when 17 transitioned to 86, Corning Incorporated gave $10 million worth of fiber optic cable. That's the highest quality connectivity for the physical layer of the internet. And it lies alongside Route 86, but it is not, as we say in the business, lit, meaning nothing connects it north and south to the people in the communities that need it. We did it with electricity in the 1930s in rural communities. We did it with the telephone. through the FCC in the 1950s. We can do it. It's not an engineering challenge. It's not a scientific challenge. It's a challenge of political will. And there's no reason why the federal government shouldn't also be involved with the state and another public-private partnership. For example, Southern Tier Network could be very well utilized to help build that internet out. They've done it for parts of Steuben County as well as Schuyler, Yates. They're working a little bit over in Allegheny. They've moved into Chemung and they're doing it for Tioga. But we used to be the #1 country in the world for the internet. We kind of created it. And now we're number 63. Wow. There's no reason why except the political will to do it. And has the result of leaving so many people behind. That's not what I know and think of when I think of the community I grew up and the community that I have the pleasure of speaking before tonight. People care about their district. They care about their neighborhood. They want opportunities to abound. Yes, everyone is an individual and we all do our individual work, but we also care that our neighbors have the opportunity to get ahead in their life too. And that's what we have been lacking in our congressional representation. That is what I hope to change if you will elect me to Congress. Thank you.
All right.
I want to say a little bit, I know that I did not touch on a lot of other things such as the environment. I did not touch on immigration reform, labor reform, and how all of this has to be done on the basis of civil rights, but I do hope in the questions we can address those issues. I just didn't want to put you to sleep with a great big long lecture. So yes, let's move to questions.
Okay, so we're going to start off with a couple questions written down. I'm going to turn it over to John from Hobart Williams Smith to ask those for you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mitrano. So our first question would be, what steps will you take to help keep Social Security safe?
It's at risk. And if it hasn't been at risk before the tax cut of 2017, it's absolutely at risk now. And this is not a state secret. Just listen to what Paul Ryan says. Just look what Mr. Reed votes for. And you know we are on a trajectory to try to reconcile a $1.9 trillion deficit created by just that one act. That doesn't include a lot of other budgetary concerns. Just that one tax act. We are in debt for $1.9 trillion. And you know, as well as I know, where they're going to try to get that money back. Medicare and Social Security. It's not a state secret. Listen to what Paul Ryan says. Watch how Tom Reed votes. What's he doing right now with the Farm Bill? He is telling people we want people to be productive and work and pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and that's why we're putting in these reporting and labor requirements. There are already reporting and labor requirements if you want to get food stamps. This concept of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, which I believe in a whole lot. I've worked very hard all my life to accomplish what I accomplished, but everyone I talk to is the same way, and they don't want a handout, but there are some people who need it, and there are children who need it. 40% of children in this district are on free and reduced lunch. When you do the math of what that means for the family's background, it means half of the people in this district, about 800,000 people, live at or around or below the poverty line. This is the United States of America. It's the wealthiest country in the world. And we have almost half of the people in our entire district with food insecurity, children going to bed hungry, housing insecurity, marginalized by all the things I just described, healthcare, education, infrastructure. And what are we doing about it? Our representative, on a pretext of something that catches your ear when you first hear it, working hard, not wanting a handout, but does not reflect the real facts of why so many people right now rely on those food stamps. So those new requirements are just a pretext to knock 2 to 3 million people off. I am sorry, I am not a partisan person by nature. I very much want to work with Republicans and independents and anyone else that wants to work with me to really solve problems and not just have clever sounding talking points about solving problems. But this is not how you do it. So I will now answer your question a little more precisely. That tax act is a big ruse to once again give very, very wealthy people a whole lot more money from your and my pockets and off the pockets of poor and middle class people. The attraction was supposed to be those couple of years that you get tax relief. Well, the wealthy get it so-called permanently. I love that word, by the way. What's permanent in law? You can always change law. It's not like it's written in stone from on high. But at any rate, if the question is what would I do, I would flip the permanent and the temporary tax relief between the very wealthy and the working and middle class. I would add many more tax brackets at the highest levels of income, and I would begin to tax them somewhere between 45 and 50%. I would bring back the estate tax instead of letting it go out. Maybe 45% is too high. Let's bring it down to 25%. In the last 50 years, since the Reagan administration, we have had our tax policy reflecting this economic theory of trickle-down economics. If there has been any utility to it, it has already done its piece. And now we see it has contributed to the largest income inequality gap that the United States has seen since the turn of the last century. So it's time to bring the estate tax because the wealthy have been sucking so much of the wealth. That is one way we get it back into the public. I hope I'm not going to offend too many people. I didn't mind that the corporate tax came down, except for the fact that we did not require as a part of the opportunity that corporations must subject themselves to U.S. tax law, no offshoring, and that they have to reinvest it in their company as well as in their staff, employees, and not just give it back to shareholders. I was okay with it going down, but we need to tie it to things that matter to the working and middle class people of this country. So, when it comes to preserving programs such as food stamps, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, let's begin by being sure that the funding is there, and that begins with turning 180 degrees a tax law that is just once more giving a whole lot of money up to the rich. By the way, I want to add one more thing. You and I paid into those programs. All our lives, all our working lives. The idea that they're going to get the greedy hands in there once again for the rich, and then say, oh, look at those programs aren't working very well. I think we should give them to the investment bankers to work on. Forget about it. I'm sorry. I'm not in on that. I participated in all of those programs, as you did too, in the belief that I would be able to rely on them when I needed them. And we still have to stand up for ourselves, because that's just a basic fact. That's your money and mine, and I don't want that going to the rich.
Another question from the audience. Where do you see the future of healthcare headed in New York and the rest of the country?
Well, New York State, of course, is very close to, and I can't remember the exact name, but a universal health care law that looks very propitious for the people of New York State. But the issue is both. People should have a basic amount of health care that isn't going to bankrupt them with one illness or one accident. And the system we have is inefficient. It is inefficient because no one is bargaining on your behalf. How is it that drugs cost so much less in Canada or Western Europe? It's because the government bargains with the drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, and says, we're not going to pay what you're foisting on the people of the United States. You're charging 25 times what we're willing to pay here, and then the drug companies have the option of not doing business or making less. Guess what they choose? Make less. We have no one bargaining for us. Healthcare costs are far, far too high in this country. And you know who has said it very clearly in the past? Mr. Reid. I've watched all of the tapes of his debates with the previous Democratic candidates, and in every single tape, he says, we have to bring the cost of health care down. I am here to tell you that the only way to do it is to have government be in a position to bargain those costs down and to minimize the degree of administrative costs that are anywhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the percent of what you pay for every time you go to the doctor. So let's help what we all see, Republican and Democrat, as the problem. Healthcare costs and drug costs are too high. Let's bring them down. But I'm going to tell you the way that it works because we have examples in other countries as to how it works. I'm not sure Mr. Reid is offering any alternative that, at least in the last 8 years, that we have seen works any better than that. Oh, by the way, he will jump. If he were here, he would leap from the rafters to say she's for single payer. You know, if that's what it's called, then let's do it. And let's be sure we understand our basic political science definitions when we do it. It is not, as Mr. Reid has been for months already, saying it's socialism. I don't know what classes he took in political science, but they weren't the ones that I had. It is simply a payer system. The government is not the employer of the providers, and it is not in control of the pharmaceutical companies. It is simply the one entity, in this case a powerful entity, that can successfully negotiate with healthcare providers and with pharmaceutical companies. And that's why I am sharing with you my belief that that is how we are genuinely going to get the cost of healthcare down.
How are you planning to keep in touch with your base of supporters so that we can continue to help you forward your agenda once elected?
It's a great question because I can't get elected without you. And once I'm in office, I can't govern without you. I think I would begin answering that by saying I truly am from and of this place. I grew up in Rochester, and I have lived in the Finger Lakes and the Southern Tier my entire life. And so coming home would be the first way that I would come back. And I am truly honored to be in a position such as I am tonight, to be here to talk to Peggy and Dave and everyone else I see, Ed, and the people whom I would like to meet and get to know. And even if I don't know your name, I do want to hear your voice. I genuinely believe in what Lincoln said a democracy is all about. It's for the people and of the people and by the people. It is not for the corporations, of the politicians bought off by them, and by the politicians that are bought off by them. So I would begin by saying I would very much enjoy coming home, as I have for 60 years of my life, and I enjoy meeting with you. I have been teaching for almost 40 of those years. I actually and genuinely enjoy the discourse, and I don't expect that to change in my personality. In fact, I expect it to grow. There are a lot of interesting new tools. I've been working in information technology now for 15 years, so there are lots of ways that I can get information about what you think and what you want. And I would hope to do all of that with all of you, to maximize your voice, maximize my ability to hear it, and come out to a night like tonight where I can see you and say hello and say, hi, Carl, where's Hope, and things like that. But she's coming. Okay. All right, very good. So, you know, that's not like a policy answer, 1, 2, 3, but I think what I'm trying to say is I never left this place. Originally, I didn't leave it because I was the only child to take care of my parents when they needed my help and were ill and ultimately passed. And then I had children of my own, and I love this place. So I'll just be back. I'm here. I'm from you and of you, and I'm proud of it.
All right. Sorry about that. Anyway, thank you to John for being here. Thank you to all the of our William Smith students for volunteering your time. Now is the fun part. Now is the fun part. We get to ask questions for everybody.
Just starting.
Yeah. So please raise your hand. I will get to you over here. You guys can introduce yourself too.
Hi, I'm Mike from Geneva. I had a question about, do you feel that the Excelsior Scholarship Program goes far enough to combat the rising cost of higher education in New York State and the rest of the country?
I think it's a nice option to have, but no, I don't think it does go far enough. I am happy to share my overall views on it. I did share what pains me and all of you the most, and it's the interest rates that we've allowed the bankers to get into the student debt. I'm not a democratic socialist. I do not believe in free college education. I do believe in funding programs and education up to an associate's degree, because right now I think that's almost the equivalent of what a high school degree was in generations past. But for four-year degrees and going forward with the appropriate interest rates, you know, including the possibility of even zero, but certainly nothing that would be higher than the IRS interest rate imputed for a loan, which is usually about 2.5%. I would continue that and not go for free education for a couple of reasons. The most important one is when Mr. Sanders and others talk about that, Senator Sanders, they're failing to mention that the models of Europe have a very different system of the K through 12 that tracks people at a very early age. And it's very challenging to try to get out of those tracks. That's not the American tradition. It's not the American system. And I wouldn't want the unintended consequence of free public education to mean that we started to track people at younger ages. I don't believe in that. The other reason is part of what makes American higher education great is the diversity of options. Small, large, public, private, parochial, not secular. And I think we should continue that tradition. And I wouldn't want to put private institutions at such a contrast to public institutions that it would, again, have the unintended effect of undermining their missions. And so I do believe in zero or very, very low interest rates on student debt. And I do believe that colleges and universities can continue to do more to find ways to open up access. But I am not a believer in totally free public education at the level of a four-year graduate or professional degree. And you know, I have to say this, you can't please everyone. I bet maybe there are some people that are disappointed to hear that. I just hope you'll know that at the end of the day, I do believe I would represent the interests of working and middle-class people with these views better than Tom Reed will. Oh, I'm sorry. I beg your pardon.
Okay,
Yes.
at the risk of creating more feedback, I'm going to try and come across this way. I have two questions. The first one is a general one which I hope you can address, and that's your feeling toward the role of science in government, and to what extent science should inform your decisions as a congressperson.
I do believe in the scientific method. I don't think science is perfect, by the way, but I think it's the method that we use to try to understand the world around us, and we would be foolhardy not to understand and recognize it when we're attempting to create policy. Let me give you an example that's probably very relevant to the people here in Geneva, or anyone around Seneca Lake, or anyone in the Finger Lakes, or anyone in the United States. I believe in a federal anti-fracking act.
Yes.
And here's why I believe in it. First of all, the oil and gas companies got it below the level of the EPA on a very common legislative trick. In the 1990s, they passed a law, and then they kind of slivered into the law this section that said that this new method that was coming up, hydraulic fracturing, would not be under the purview of the EPA. That was wrong. That's something we could fix, but that's not all that's wrong with fracking. It despoils our environment. And I'm sorry, this place is just too beautiful to do that, but so is everyone else's backyard. The third and most important, and this is decisive for me, is that it does not appear that that method could use any other approach, specifically with its chemicals, that are not harmful to human and other biological life. In particular, it affects the nervous system, and there is no reason why we should be pursuing an extraction method at the disadvantage and deficit of all of us. It just makes no sense. That is why we have the healthcare report. That is why the governor has acted on that ban. And I do not believe that that method has any opportunity going forward to prove itself any better, although if it did, we would rely on science to test it.
If I may,
I think you'd like to follow.
just this is a quick one, which is not issue related, but I for one, am struck by the articulate way in which you're presenting your positions, and I'd just like to know how you prepared yourself for this ordeal going through this campaign, and being so familiar with the many things that you have to talk about.
That was a nice question.
I don't agree with everything you say, but I'm really impressed with how you say it.
Yeah. Well, what can I say? I mean, I am very proud. I'm not trying to show off. I'm very proud to have earned a doctorate in American history and a law degree from a good law school like Cornell. But I'm most proud of the work I've done teaching all of my life. I had a great career as an administrator at Cornell. I created a information technology policy framework that became a model for colleges and universities around the country. When I was out on my own as a consultant, I worked for the New York Public Library and helped them get $52 million. The de Blasio campaign, de Blasio government gave the New York Public Library to improve its information technology, and it needed it. And you know, it's public record. I made $40,000 on it. So it's not like I took home, you know, $50 bucks. But I've had wonderful experiences. I am genuinely grateful for them. I am sincerely pained to see the direction that this country has taken, from everything from income inequality gap to the interest rates on student loans, to see the opportunities I've had in Strict. And that's why I am here tonight. And I'm glad to use whatever skills I have acquired over my career to share my thoughts. This woman in the back has a question that might be related to fracking.
This is actually a civil rights question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. See you now.
This
Yeah.
is actually a civil rights question.
Oh, okay.
There are approximately 20 million people in the United States who are gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender, who are not protected by federal law. A few regulations which this present administration is trying to strike down. 15,000 transgender soldiers serving in critical functions in the United States military. What will you try to do to protect our minority community and other minority communities in this nation? Thank you.
Thank you. I oppose President Trump's policy in the area of transgender people serving in the military. Now, that has been done not through legislation in Congress, but by his own order. Here's what I would do about that. Unlike Mr. Reed, I would stand up and say I think it's wrong. As I also would have said after Charlottesville, and as I absolutely would have screamed about separating children from their parents and guardians crossing the border. With respect to what Congress can do in the area of, I guess let's call it LGBTQ, is amend the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include that community. Right now, it does not.
Would you tell us what you feel women should have this under your aegis? Would, for example, availability of birth control, availability of pregnancy, or whatever? What's your feeling about
Ryan, can you, I wasn't sure I heard.
Yeah.
Well,
female choices in life?
Women's health care broadly, and birth control as well as registries.
I believe in legal, safe, affordable, and available women's reproductive rights. I believe in a system where all Americans have access